This conference will now be
Right. Anyone, any questions, guys? Any questions that I can take till here? Anyone, any questions that I can take? Anything that I can address? Anyone,
Hi,
anything?
good morning, sir. Ranjit here.
Uh, Good, Ranjit.
Okay, sir, I have received an email from Azure that free trial request has was completed to increase
Okay,
the free parallelism.
okay, great. So once you receive the email, right, uh, what
Hmm.
you do is that just go into your project and
Okay,
under your project, there is something called project settings. So just go in here
okay,
and under this, there is something called parallel jobs. Under pipelines, there's something
parallel
called parallel
jobs.
jobs out here. Yes.
Okay,
Under the parallel jobs, when you click on this, there is something called Microsoft hosted agents for private projects. Something called Microsoft hosted.
okay,
See whether you have something like one parallel job up to 1800 minutes per month. See whether this gets
okay,
reflected. If this gets reflected, we are good with that.
okay, okay. I'll do that.
Sure.
Thank you.
So please keep monitoring your emails, guys. Please check for that particular email because in the coming classes in the next week, we would be let's say really need or we would really need something called as parallel jobs. I'll explain why we need that and so on and so forth. But please keep monitoring your email. Just like Ranjit got it, you'll also will receive email updates from Microsoft telling that the parallelism request has been completed and so on and so forth. Yes, anyone? Any more questions, guys?
Yes, sir. I have. It's mentioned that one parallel job up to 1800 minutes per month.
Yes, we are good with that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, someone else had a question. I'm sorry.
So, when I do some changes in the local repository and remote repository, and when I
Okay.
say sync, it will do pull
Okay.
and push operations simultaneously, right?
Yes.
So, when I get that, it threw an error like merge conflicts.
Yes. Merge conflicts. That's something is a concept that I wanted to really cover today. Is the fact that we have something called as merge conflict. What is really a merge conflict? Let's look at that. Now, see, let's say that we have created something called as a Git repository in the form of Azure repos, and inside that Git repository, right, we might have multiple branches, something like a main branch or something like a develop branch and so on and so forth. We'll talk about those branches today. So let's say that we have a main branch, and what we are doing as a development team or as a DevOps team is that firstly we are making a copy of this particular main branch in our local laptops. So we're making a copy of this particular main branch, or we are just making a clone. We are doing a git clone out here right now. This is not only you, since it's a distributed version control mechanism, I have one more team member also going ahead and doing the same thing. There are multiple clone operations that are happening right now as such. So you're doing a clone, and the other person is also doing a clone, the third person is also doing a clone, so on and so forth. So multiple people are going ahead and doing a clone out here as such. Now the fact or the matter of the fact is that let's say there is a file here in your main branch called sample.txt. Let's say that you have done some changes. You as a developer one has done some changes into this file into a line number called line number one, wherein you are adding something. Let's say at the same time, this developer doesn't know that you are working on this. We are not really sure on, let's say, we are two different developers sitting in different parts of the country or different parts of the world. We are trying to work on the same project. Now, you're a developer too, and you're editing this line, editing this same line out here. So now Git identifies that, two developers working in the same file, working in the same line, they are now running into something called as a merge conflict. Meaning Git now identifies that, Git now tells you that, hey, you hold on, wait, you are editing a line. The other person is also editing the same line. Now, which edit should I really consider right now? Which one should I really consider right now as such is what Git will tell you right now. This is called as a merge conflict. And in order to, let's say, resolve this, we call them as conflict resolutions. And all the conflict resolutions are achieved using pull requests. So if you want to resolve a merge conflict that you are encountering, we need to resolve it via a pull request out here. For example, how do I do that? Let's see. What I can do right now is, let me go into a repository. Let me create a new repository and let's create a simple file out here. So firstly, I'll click on this drop down. I'll say new repository. I'll say merge conflict ICT. Create this out. And I'm just going ahead creating a repository with the name merge conflict itself. Now what I'm doing right now is that I'll go into the branches of this repository and let's say that there are two developers telling it is developer 1 based out of the main branch, and then I have someone called as a developer 2 again based on the main branch out here as such. So there are two developers who are working on the same file, and let me go ahead add a file here. So I'll say new add file. I'll say sample.txt. And here in this particular main branch, I'll say this is main branch. I'll commit this out, and I have one line here called this is main branch. Now what I'll do is I'll go into my repository, and as a developer 1 I'll clone this out. So I'm cloning this branch as a developer 1 right now into my local Git system. I'll say open this out. So this is going to ask me where I want to clone this out. I'll just go ahead and say select repository location, and this is now going to clone the entire repository into my local machine out here right now. So I'll say just open, say don't save. Fine. So I now got the sample.txt, and in here I have one line called this is a main branch, and I am working on the main branch. If you observe, if you all observe it, I am now starting to work on the main branch right now. But since I am a developer 1, right? What I'll do in my machine is that I'll make sure to work on the developer branch. So what I'll do is I'll click on this and I'll say, you know what, I am developer 1, so I'll go with this particular branch out here called develop 1 out here. And here in that particular development branch, let me see. Okay, fine. So I created this after, okay, doing the rebase, fine. So what I'll do right now is I'll say add a file called demo.txt. So I am a developer 1. I am adding a file called demo.txt right now. And what I'm going to do is that I'll say this is a sample line from developer 1. I'll save this file and I'll stage this file, and I'll say this is sample change from developer 1. Commit this, and once I do that, I'll go ahead push the changes back into the developer 1 branch. So I'm trying to push the change back into developer 1, and what will happen is that if I come here, change my branch to developer 1, I now have this particular branch. Now have in the demo in the developer 1, I only have, let's say, something like demo.txt. In the main branch, I have something called sample.txt right now. So what I'll do right now is I will create a merge request, or I'll create a pull request from developer 1 to the main branch. Can I do it using VS Code? Yes, you can do it using VS Code. You can just click these three dots and just scroll down branches, and there is something called merge branch. And as and when I do it, it's asking this is developer one, where do you want to merge it? I'll say I want to merge it into that particular main branch out here, and I'll just seeing the changes back. I'll say okay. Now what's going to happen right now is that this is going to, let's say, create a pull request and then merge all the changes into the main branch. So now if I come here and say main, and let's see, it's now having a pull request. Let's see, I'll create a pull request right now into developer one main. Say this is test, create, and I'll just say approve, and I'll complete this out. So what I'm doing is that I'm creating a pull request between developer one and the main branch right now. And if I come into the main branch, I have that demo text, and this is, it says this is sample from developer one and so on and so forth. Now developer two is not aware of this change. Let's say developer two, he's working on his own machine, and what developer two is doing right now is that developer two is telling, okay, fine, I'll work on my own branch, and in this branch he doesn't have that particular demo.txt. Let's say he doesn't know that demo.txt is already there. He just adds this out. He says this is dev2 and saves this change out. And once he saves this change out, let's do one thing. Let's commit these changes. So I'll say come here, I'll stage everything. I'll say this is developer 2, commit everything out, and then go ahead and push the changes back. As and when I push the changes back, I can now go ahead and again do a pull request. So now if I do a pull request from that particular branch called developer 2, so the developer 2 is updated, I'll say create a pull request into the main branch. I'll say create. This will result into something called as a merge conflict. It's saying, you know what, this is edited in both the demo.txt, because main branch also has the same demo.txt edited by the developer one. Now developer true is trying to, let's say, edit the same file, again send it into the main branch once again. This will result into something known as a merge conflict right now. So that's what I have right now, a merge conflict, which is telling that, you know what, this file that you see here, the file that you see here is edited into both. So I won't be able to, let's say, complete your merge request even on, let's say, the local machine. If you kind of, let's say, do a merge, let's say branch, let's say merge branch, and let's take the origin develop, which is my main branch right now, and I'll try to sync the changes back. I'll say yes, sync the changes, and I'm trying to, let's say, do a merge between right now. Okay, let me do one thing. Let me try to emerge it once again. Say changes. Okay, say branch. I'll say merge branch, and I'll say merge it into the main branch right now, and try to push all my changes. So now all the changes are getting pushed into the developer branch right now, and I still see a conflict right now as such. So no matter what I do, I still see this conflict. So let me do one thing. Let me try to, let's say, get all my changes back again. Let's say push this, I'll say merge this out, and I'll say go ahead and, let's say, use the main branch right now, and it doesn't really do anything. Let me see if I put it into my main branch. Okay, origin main doesn't have this, and let's see, this main doesn't have this. Okay, let me do one quick thing real quick out here. Let's see, origin main. Okay, let me do a git fetch firstly in order to pull all the changes and make sure that I am in sync with the repository. So let's see. Yes, I'm in sync with the repository right now, and let me see what does the developer 2 has. And yes, the developer 2 has this one. Now let me try to, let's say, go ahead and do a merge here into the origin main. And as and when I do that, right, even the local git repository tells me that, you know what, this is the issue. That, you know what, there is a change that I see, and this file is edited into both the, let's say, branches out here, and it's telling me that, you know what, uh, the head already has something called, this is a sample change from development 1, and right now the current change is this is developed 2. So you're trying to edit the same file called let's say the demo.txt, which is this file, and this file already has some content called this is developer 1 on the main branch. So on the main branch this file already has some content pushed by a different developer out here right now. And what I'm trying to do right now is that using my own branch called developer 2, I'm trying to go ahead and change the content to this is developer 2, and now it's telling me that, you know what, you're now running into a merge conflict. Now this is what you have right now. It's telling accept the current change, which is this one. Current change is that, you know what, please go ahead and let's say put in something called dev2. It's now telling accept incoming change. This is the incoming change, which is developer 1. It's telling accept both of them or try to compare the change. I'll say okay fine, accept the current change, which is, let's say I want to edit this out to let's say developer 2. I'll say accept current change. I'll say resolve this conflict. So it's telling okay fine, this is developer 2. I'll say complete merge. I'll say complete merge with unhandled. Fine. So now I'm telling okay fine, this is the conflict resolution that I have done. I'll say commit these changes out. I'll just sync the changes, and once I sync my changes back again, I'll just go ahead do a merge back again. I'll say fine, this is branch, this is merge branch into let's say the main branch. And now if I come back and now go into the pull requests, now I have no conflicts out here. So what I did here is that on my local machine I resolved all my conflicts, and now if I see, this is the line which is coming, just telling this is sample from developer 1, and that's just being overridden by something called developer 2. Then I can go ahead and let's say complete this out, and this is how I can merge my changes back. So once if I see my main branch right now, this is dev2. I have merged my, let's say, or I have merged my changes by doing something called as a conflict resolution. So when are you going to let's say run into a conflict? All likely when you're working with a Git repository, this is the most common issue. How do you resolve it? You have to resolve it on your local machine by pulling the changes, trying to merge it back again, and once you try to merge it back again, it's going to tell you that, you know what, you are running into a merge conflict. Do you want to really resolve this out? And what kind of a change do you want to accept? Do you want to accept the incoming change, or do you want to accept the current change, or do I want to take everything else and let's say merge it out? That's what it is now telling me, and once this is done, I'll be able to resolve that particular merge conflict out here as such. So these are merge conflicts, and this is how you resolve something called as a merge conflict out here as such. Yes, any questions still here?
Hi, Abhishek. Good morning.
Good, Lisa. Good. Good morning.
Sorry to say this, but can you please repeat again? This was very fast.
The the entire thing, sir, you have to rerun the entire video again, because if I would like to repeat the entire thing, it'll again take half an hour for me to do that. And I was going super slow out here. I did not really do fast. I was going super slow, but I was just going through a lot of screens out here. Maybe that's the reason you're a little confused out here as
Yes, yes,
such.
that only.
Yes. So you have to rewatch this particular video at a very slow pace so that you can know what exactly that I'm doing out here as such.
Okay.
Yes. Any more questions, guys?
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Please go ahead.
Sir, under local Git database, each and everything going to preserve right here. Means whatever the
Yes,
changes
correct.
we have made and
Mm-hmm.
everything. So, like in the portal, in the history, we have seen the whatever the changes is made using the portal something. So,
Yes.
so in the local Git database, where we can see the changes sir, in that .git folder.
In the .git folder, in order to see those changes, you will have to run commands. So you'll have to, let's say, go and say new terminal, and in this new terminal, you have to, let's say, change it to something called git bash. So I'm opening a git bash, and you can say something called git logs. Okay, so let's see git hyphen hyphen help. Should be something like get history or something like that. Let's see. So you would have a command called a git history and or git just git log. Okay, fine. It's just a git log, not logs. So see this, right? Now it's telling you that okay, fine. You know what?
Yes.
These are all the logs out here for a branch called developer branch. What are all the changes that are done? And as and when I enter, you see there are different commits that are coming in. So this is developer 2, this is test, and all these things is now basically it's giving me right now. So this is the end of let's say the comment. Again, if you just switch the branch into something called origin main and just try to let's say rerun my terminal right now. Now I am into the main branch, and if I just go ahead and say let's do the terminal once again. And if I just go into the logs out here, this is going to give me the logs that, or this is going to give me the logs out here for the main branch out here as such. So as and when I press the enter out here on my keyboard, this is now going to show me the logs out here. So I won't be able to see the logs directly going to the git log folder. So I cannot go directly into that particular folder out here. This is a hidden folder which is let's say managed completely by Git. So I won't be able to let's say look at directly this one. Again, it will tell you what is references, what is heads, and all that stuff. So it won't give you really a good idea on how to let's say look at the logs from let's say this particular folder out here. But if you just go ahead run a command called git log, that will basically help you to understand what are the logs out here as such.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you. And one thing, sir,
Mm,
once we set the username and email address, when the
yes,
first time, is it possible to replace or changes that
yes, you
username?
can. Yes, you can run the same command again. Called sorry, you can run the same
Git.
command again. Yes, git config user dot name and git config user dot email, and you can rerun those same commands, and that will help you reset those credentials out here as such.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yes, any more questions, guys? Anyone? Any more
So
questions here? Hmm?
we can
Please.
also create a new branch from the VS Code, right?
Yes, you can also create a new branch from the VS Code. So if you just click on this one, source control, just click on these three dots again, and if you say branches, you can say create a branch or create a branch from. So here I can give the name of the branch telling it is developer 2 or developer 3. Based on it's asking me, okay, fine, which branch do you want to base this on? If I say main, this is going to create a developer 3 branch for me, and I can go ahead and publish this branch. So if I publish this branch will be now uploaded onto the Azure portal out here, right, or onto the Azure DevOps portal out here right now. So I have a developer 3 that's getting reflected out here as such. So yes, you can also go ahead and do the same operation on your local machine and publish the branch directly onto let's say this particular Git repository out here as such.
So to get the branch from remote repo to local repo, we have to fetch, and
Yes,
local repo to remote repo, we have to publish.
correct.
And while creating the new branch, it is asking two different options like new branch from and new branch. When we select new branch and add some test branch name, and it will default take the reference branch as main branch. Or
No, it won't take a reference as main. So if you come here, say for example, I do a developer 4. So I'll say branches again. I'll say create a branch. Now I'm not doing a create branch from. I'm just doing a create branch. I'll say developer 4 and I'll say enter. And if I just do publish branch out here right now, let's look at the files in the developer 4. So yes, that's right. I mean, you're right. It is taking let's say the default branch as the let's say the main branch out here if I'm not wrong. So let's come here. Let's do a quick refresh and let's compare this out. Okay, let's start up one. This is the main branch and etc. Let's see. Where did it really take this from? Let's say compare. If I have a branch comparison, let's compare this out. So it is taking it from the let's say the last checkout branch. So yes, the last checkout branch was developer 3. So from the developer 3, what are all the changes? It's just taking them from let's say the developer 3 out here as such. and I also want to see the main branch out here. Yes, let's say something like main. Okay, so main branch in my, let's say, local machine is pointing to dev1. So yes, by default, there is something called as a default branch called main. Here is a default branch. So you're right. So if you don't mention anything, it would, let's say, go ahead and take that particular developer one branch as your default branch out here as such.
Okay. And if you take any reference branch, what is the
Hmm.
criteria to be followed to select a reference branch?
Sorry, what is the criteria to what? I'm sorry, I didn't get your
Okay.
question.
If we select a new branch from, we can select
Okay.
in different branches, right? So,
Yes,
what is the
correct.
criteria to be followed while selecting a reference branch?
Nothing really. Like if you want to, let's say, go ahead and create a new branch out of, let's say, a different branch out here apart from main, you can still do that, provided the branch that you select is in sync with the main branch. That's the only criteria that I would say we need to, let's say, relook at. If it's not in sync, then it will, go ahead and it will result into merge conflicts out here as such. Yes, any more questions, guys? Okay, so let's get into this stuff now. Branches are quite important in a Git based repository, as you all saw. Uh, just a second, let me fine. Branches are super important, let's say, in a Git based repository. And again, a lot of developers maintain their own branches out here as such. Branches. Now, in a Git based repository, let's go ahead and say this is DevOps and let's get a Git based repository out here. So, in a Git based repository like Azure repos, whenever you create a repository, you get a branch called as a main branch. You have a branch called as something called as a main branch out here. This is a default branch that comes up whenever you create the repository out here. This is what Git will give you, telling it's a default branch with something called as a readme.md file out here as such. Now, generally in an organization, we preserve or we treat this main branch for backup purposes. What do I mean by this? Is that this branch should always and always contain code that can be ready to be deployed. That can be deployed. Meaning, just in case something happens to my live environment, right? I want to get the code from the main branch and deploy this out. Meaning, this code that is there in the main branch should be thoroughly tested, should be thoroughly preserved, and very importantly, I cannot let my developers, please hear me out very fine. I cannot let my developers make any changes to the main branch. So, no changes allowed directly. There shouldn't be any change that is allowed out here as such. So I'll just write it down here also. Again, this is a sample strategy that is followed by an organization. Not all organizations follow the same thing. I'm just giving you a sample strategy that is followed by the organization so that you can get a very good understanding of how the branching and merging strategies are followed in an enterprise scale. And then we can, let's say, take questions on the same thing out here. So no commits allowed here. Since this is backup, no commits allowed. How can I restrict that? I can go into the branch. Let's go ahead and create a new repository. Since this has a lot of branches, I'll say new repository and say that I am working for a repository called as an iOS app. I'm working for, let's say, an iOS application so that I can release it on top of, let's say, iPhones and etc. So Apple is my, let's say, the client. I am working for the client to develop and deliver this particular application called iOS app out here. I'll just say create this out. So now let me go to the branches. So now I have something called iOS app as a repository under which I have something called as a main branch And now I am telling that this branch should only be, let's say, treated as a backup branch. So what I can do as an administrator here is I can say more options, and I can lock this branch out. I can apply something called as a branch lock. A branch lock being applied here. Now, as and when I apply a branch lock, right, what's going to happen is that no other developer will be able to use this branch and make his commits. I am restricting my developers to go ahead and make commits onto the main branch out here as such. So this this is a branch which you cannot go ahead and let's say commit things out here as such. But the developers need some of the other branches, right? The developer needs some of the other branch to go ahead and let's say preserve their changes, for which I as a DevOps engineer will go ahead create a new branch for them called as a develop branch or a dev branch or a development branch based on the main branch out here as such. So I'm going ahead and I'm creating something known as a develop branch out here. From the main branch, I created a develop branch for all my developers, and I'm asking my developers that you know what, all your code, meaning if you are a developer 1, developer 2, developer 3, all your code should come back into the main branch. Sorry, or come back into the develop branch. All your code, you should take all your code and commit it back into the develop branch out here. This is, let's say, the primary branch where you should store all your code out here as such. The developers agree to it, but let's say the developer 1 is working on the same branch, developer 2 is working on the same branch, developer 3 is working on the same branch out here, and if they are allowed to go ahead and do a direct commit, meaning if they are allowed to go ahead and let's say do direct editing onto the develop branch, my changes can be overridden by some other developer. It will result into a lot of issues out here. Like I am doing some change, the other developer is doing a change, third developer is doing a change. Everyone will run into a conflict. So I, as an administrator of Azure DevOps, or I, as a DevOps engineer, I am telling that my developers, or I'm telling to my developers that you know what, please don't commit directly on this branch out here. Please don't do that. Rather, please create your own branches. Each and every developer, please go ahead create your own branches out here and call them as a feature branch. Feature, because I am a developer called developer 1 working on one of the features of that particular iOS application. Developer 2 is working on another feature of the iOS application. Developer 3 is working on another feature of the iOS application. So each and every developer gets their own branch called as a feature branch. So let me go there into, let's say, the branches, and I as a developer will take something called as a feature branch or create something something called as a feature branch from something known as a development branch out here right now, or a develop branch out here right now. Also, I'm now telling, or I'm now asking my developers not to go ahead and do a direct commit. Your commits are allowed. Yes, you can go ahead and make changes to the developer branch. You should be able to go ahead and make changes to the developer branch, but by using a pull request, not a direct change. And if you would like to, let's say, go ahead and do, or if you would like to go ahead and implement such a kind of a restriction on a branch, it can be done via something called as a branch policy. Known as branch policy out here. A branch policy is in place to restrict someone from making a direct change onto your branches. Why is it important? In a huge organization like an organization which is developing the iOS application, I have a lot of developers working under the same repository. And if all the developers go ahead and let's say commit their change onto the same branch out here called develop branch, it will result into conflicts. In order to avoid those conflicts and in order to maintain a good quality of the code, I come up with some kind of a restriction called as a branch policy out here. So what I'll do is I'll come here into the develop branch, say more options, and if I just scroll down, I have something called as branch policies out here. I'll just click on this. Now it's telling, see if branch policy is enabled, branch cannot be deleted, and the changes must be made via pull request. Two things. If you apply this particular branch policy, you cannot do a direct change, nor you can delete your branches. And there are multiple branch policies that Azure DevOps really provides out here. There's something called required minimum number of reviewers. There's something called work item linking, comment resolution, limit merging types, build validation, status check, automatic reviewers, a lot of things out here. What I'll do today is I'll just put one branch policy today telling require minimum number of reviewers. I am telling that, you know what, if you are creating a feature branch, I as a developer, in order to take my changes to the develop branch, I will raise something known as a pull request. So I would want to, let's say, go ahead and create a pull request out here to take my changes from one branch and merge it into the other. And for this pull request, I need one of my leads, my team leads, to go ahead and check whether I'm doing the right change, and I want them to approve this out. That's where approvals come into picture, and you can enforce approvals using something called as a branch policy. So what I'll do is I'll say I require a minimum of, let's say, one reviewer, because I am the only one in this project, guys. Remember, I only created one project. I am the only one in this project, and that's the reason I'm telling allow requesters to approve their own change. Meaning, if I request for a pull request, please go ahead and let me approve the same thing. In a real-time scenario, you won't check this out. In a real-time scenario, this will be unchecked. Meaning, if you raise a pull request, you cannot approve the same pull request out here because conflict of interest. So, but for now, I'll just put this in, and as and when I put it in, right, let me go back to the branches. And if you see, just beside the develop branch, I have a badge. This badge is called as a branch policy. This badge is now called as a branch policy, which means that if I go inside this particular branch called develop, and if I come here into the file, if I try to directly edit this, let's say, branch out here, let's say if I try to directly edit this particular folder or edit this particular file, say this is a sample change, and try to commit here and say commit, it will directly throw an error message telling that, you know what, pushes to this branch are not permitted. You must use a pull request to update this particular branch. So you as a developer should try to, let's say, use a pull request out here. So I as a developer, what I'll do is I'll now say, okay, fine, you know what, this is not possible. So I am a developer called Kiran. I'll say new branch. I'll say feature / Kiran test. And I'm pasting this branch out of something called as a develop branch right now as a create. So I have a folder called feature under which I have a branch called Kiran test. I can come inside this branch. I can edit this branch because my feature branch will not have a branch policy. So if I check this out, I have a branch policy on the development branch, but on the feature branch, I am free to go ahead and, let's say, make any changes out here. So I can come here and I can go to the readme file and I can say this is a sample change, and I can commit this. And once committed, I can go ahead create something called as a pull request from feature Kiran test into the develop branch that I just created this branch out from, and I'll say create, and this will now create a pull request. And now if you see, this pull request is now awaiting for someone to approve it out, saying, you know what, at least one reviewer must approve it because your branch policy enforces the same thing. Your branch policy is enforcing that at least one reviewer should come here and go ahead and approve this particular change, and only then you would be able to, let's say, go ahead and merge your changes out here as such. So I say, okay, fine, this is good. Let me go ahead and let me try to go ahead and give an approval here. I'll say approve, and it's telling one reviewer has approved it out. After that, you can say go ahead and let's say complete this out. And this is what I'll do. As and when I am done with my feature branch, I would want to delete the feature branch out here. I would want to go ahead and delete the particular feature branch out here as such. Why would I want to delete the feature branch out here? Very simple reason. Imagine you have multiple developers working on this project and they create multiple feature branches. At a later point in time, this is going to create a lot of confusion. So the best practice here is to delete a feature branch after it is done. That's the reason feature branches are called as a short-lived branch. The purpose is to just go ahead and make a change. Features are called short-lived branches out here. Purpose is to just go ahead, make a change, merge it back into the develop branch, and once it's done, I'll mark this for deletion. I'll say complete merge. And once this is done, the pull request is merged. Once the pull request is merged, the branch will also be deleted, and your change will come inside let's say the develop branch out here. It's telling this is sample change, and this is coming via a pull request. The change is now coming via a pull request. This is how the developers go ahead and work with each other without running into conflicts. So now we are looking at three different branches. One is main for backup, feature, and something called develop. Develop being a default branch in a developmental activity. So let me put this as a default branch out here. And we use feature pull requests, meaning pull requests from the feature branches in order to make changes under the develop branch. Reason being, we have implemented something called as a branch policy onto the develop branch out here, which is restricting us to go ahead and do a direct change. So this is how we implement something called as a policy out here as such. So yes, guys, any questions that I can take till here? Anyone, any questions that I can take till here out here?
Sir, I have
Good,
a note,
please.
sir.
Good, please.
Sir, once we applied the delete option on top of that feature branch, so
Yes.
after that pull request to the development batch, then if the developer wants to take that code back from the developer, is it possible, sir?
Yes,
Development.
yes, they can do it. Simple, they'll just go ahead and run a git fetch command on the local machine. So once they run the git fetch command on the local machine, right, you'll just go
Okay.
ahead, download all the latest changes that is there on the developer branch, and then they can start working on a new feature branch, and then let's say do a pull request and so on and so forth.
So after that, again he can apply full request and again he should delete
Yes,
that.
yes, again he should delete the branch out here as such.
Okay, sir.
Again,
Thank you.
deleting a branch is a best practice because at the
Okay.
end of the day, let's say you have 100 developers making 100 changes in 1 hour, you'll have 100 different branches reflecting on your repository. That will end up putting you into a bit of confusion. You do not really know which branch to use and so on and so forth. So it's a best practice to go ahead and let's say delete the branches once you're done with the same thing. Is any more questions, guys? Anyone? Any more questions that I can take till you?
Uh,
Good, please.
sir, is it possible to do all these things on the local machine? This
Yes. Mhm.
creating this
Yes. Yes.
future branch and everything.
Yes. See again, feature is
And
nothing but a branch, right? So you can just
sorry,
go ahead. Yes. You can just go ahead, say create a new branch from. You can call this as feature. I can call this feature Kiran test here from the main branch or
and
from
this
the develop
approval
branch.
process and everything, sir. Is it possible done from
Approval
this?
process, no. You have to come to Azure DevOps. Approval procedure, you have to come to Azure DevOps and approve it out. So for approving a pull request, for reviewing a pull request, I, as a technical lead of your team, should come to Azure DevOps and look at that particular pull request, see what are the changes coming in, and then only approve the change out here as such. Yes, any more questions, guys? Anyone, any more questions that I can take? Okay, so that's it from my end then. In tomorrow's session, I'll again just go. We'll just go ahead and do a quick revision on what are branch policies, and then we'll go into something called as branching and merging strategies out here as such. Until then, thank you and have a good day ahead, guys. Thank you.